Hey, what's going on, guys? In this video, I'm going to be talking about the maintenance and wear parts that I replaced on my Divex Piranha. It is a 2019, late 2018 or 2019 model. One of the stickers says 2018. The inspection, it looks like, was done on December of 2019, so I really don't know. It's 5 years old at least. So I thought some of these wear parts probably would be a bad idea to replace them. So before we get into the main components, I just want to explain that this isn't going to be a video step-by-step explanation. Unfortunately, I did not record the whole process. It took me about 2.5 hours with having to take it apart again after I made a mistake, and I'll explain that in a little bit. But I will go through it as thoroughly as I can and give you as best of an explanation as I can on how to do this yourself. It doesn't take a whole lot of tools. It's pretty much what you see in front of you, and some of these are optional. An Allen set of some sort. I use this ratcheting screwdriver with Allen bits. Snap ring pliers for sure, because you need that to remove the front shaft bearing. A flathead screwdriver just to get the proper alignment on the motor. Something to press the bearings in and out. I used extensions and sockets, just anything that will match the outer diameter for the bearing to press in and out. In this case, I believe the 16 millimeter fits the front shaft seal or front shaft bearing perfectly. And I'll show you some stills on how I did that and explain what I did when those photos pop up. The needle nose are really just needed to grab the small bolts inside the housing, and I'll show you where those are located and what they're holding down. And then additionally, the last thing really is this cardboard cutout. This is a belt-driven DPV. This cardboard cutout helps hold the belt in place so that you can drop the motor in and it just slides right in, pushing the cardboard out. It helps line everything up. You can get it done without it, but it actually does. It does help. There is a video by Divex on how they explain to replace these belts, so I'm not going to get super in depth on that. That is a great video. It's not very long, and they, I believe, have a link to a template for cutting this out. I just eyeballed it. I cut it too big and then just cut it down smaller and smaller to make it work. But that's the basic shape of it. That's really it as far as that goes. Again, that's the belt. This is a belt-driven system. It works great. People have had issues with the belts breaking. I haven't had mine long, just a couple months. And again, I don't know when it was last replaced, but I figured I would replace it just because it's a wear item. So that's the belt. This is, and I'll show you better pictures of it, but this is the shaft seal. There's a rubber grommet in there, and then you have this very smooth surface here that seals, creates a seal with the pump seal. This goes pressed into the body itself, and that prevents water from getting through and reaching the rear bearing, which sits in the body like that. And I'll show you all of that in the pictures, like I said, as I'm going through and replacing everything. This is the front shaft bearing. This is the one that's held in by the snap ring. And it's odd that this one's further in, but it has the most amount of signs of damage, likely from water. I'm guessing that every time the previous owner took the top cap off, water would drip right down the center or onto the tensioner pulley assembly. And this is kind of where it would end up because it's a low spot in the center. In any case, I'm glad I replaced it because this does feel like it has a little bit of a a flat spot in it, so now I have new ones in there. And that's it. As far as this stuff goes, I'll pull the DPV over and show you the components and briefly talk about what's holding them in place and what you need to do to get them out. Move this out of the way. All right. You're not going to be able to see it, so I'm going to have to take the phone off, and hopefully I won't be too shaky showing you all that stuff. All right, guys, I'll briefly go over the components inside the housing. It's not a whole lot to this unit, as I said. You have your motor. It's held in by 3 bolts, 1, 2, and 3 there. You've got the controller with the lead going to the motor, and then the lead that goes out to the battery modules. You've got your switch that has the lead going out to the controller as well. And then you have the tensioner assembly. That nut right there is a 10 millimeter. That's how you release the tension on the belt. This assembly is only held in by 2 bolts, that one and that one right there. And the shaft itself is held in place by that bolt and washer. The bearing, as you can see, has a snap ring, an internal snap ring that you need the snap ring pliers for. But other than that, that's really everything inside here. There's not a whole lot to it. I'll show you a picture up in the corner of the belt drive assembly as is installed. I was able to get a halfway decent picture. That'll be up on the top right corner here. And then the only other thing is the propeller assembly. This has a plate, mounting plate, that's part of the drive shaft that goes into the body. As I said, that's what has the shaft seal attached to it, and then the pump seal goes onto the body itself. There'll be more images and explanation on how all that comes together as we get through this video. Again, I apologize. It's not a video. It's going to be a bunch of stills and me explaining what they are and what I was doing at that moment. Hope this helps. If it does, let me know. If you have any questions, please ask in the comments, and we'll get into the explanation. Okay, so once you've removed the controller by removing those 4 small Allen bolts, go ahead and remove the 3 bolts for the motor. Once you do that, the belt will be freed up, and you'll be able to drop that down by taking it off from the drive pulley or the driven pulley. After that, you'll want to remove this bolt right here. This will free up the drive shaft and allow it to drop down. When that happens, it'll drop to the bottom of the case, and you'll be able to access the Allen bolts. From the bottom, you'll notice the pump seal that's in the body. Notice the groove, or the lack of groove, I should say. Flip it back over and remove the 2 bolts for the tensioner assembly. Once that's out of the way, you'll have access to that pulley again, and you'll be able to remove that by taking out these 2 Allen screws. Once that happens, you'll be able to drop the shaft all the way out and look at the shaft seal. As you can see, it's pretty rusty, and it was a bit stuck on that shaft, as well as the rubber seal. It does not look very good anymore. So with the shaft seal removed, this is what the entire thing looks like. Mine's not too bad, so a paper towel was all I needed to clean it up. The next thing you'll want to do is remove that inner snap ring with the snap ring pliers that I showed you earlier. Be careful, because they do have a tendency to come flying out at you. As you can see, mine's pretty rusty, just like the bearing I showed you earlier. It's most likely where most of the water was falling into when the cap was removed. The next thing you'll want to do is find some sockets. The main one being the drive socket. That's got to be the same diameter as the outer race of the bearing. You don't want to risk damaging it. And then the bearings has to be able to fit into the outer socket, so that needs to be big enough. This is the bearing after I pushed it out. I just used the vise. You can see how rusty it is. Not really sure, but that's what it looks like. This is the new bearing. I put a little bit of wheel bearing grease on it to aid in pushing it in. And similar to removal, you have to use a socket that fits the outer race so that you can push it in nice and evenly and not too far. After that, went ahead and put the snap ring in, again wearing safety glasses because they do tend to fly everywhere. Next step is to remove the pump seal on the body. This is actually pretty easy to remove just by using a screwdriver and prying up on it. Just be careful not to mar anything up. Here you'll notice the pump seal. The back side of it has a groove on it. When you go to put it back on, make sure that the groove is toward the bearing. Then to remove the rear bearing itself, I used a socket, again matching the outer race, and an extension. Just tapped it a few times, not too hard, just some easy firm taps. It will come out, and then you'll have the bearing. You'll notice a little bit of rust on the back side where it's furthest out. Not too bad. The casing itself was in really good shape, just a little bit of cleanup needed with that. Again, a paper towel did the trick here. Next thing to do is put the rear bearing on. Reverse order of taking it out, just tap the bearing in with some light grease on the outer edges, on the outer race. You'll notice here that I put the pump seal in the wrong way. I actually put it all together, did the vacuum test, and it actually held vacuum. I almost left it that way, but something told me that if I left it and actually tried to run it like that, it was probably going to cause an issue and a leak down the road. So I went ahead and took it apart and flipped the seal and put it back in. Fortunately, because it's not very tight in there, it shouldn't cause any issues. The next thing you'll want to do is install the shaft seal. I went ahead and lubed up the shaft with some wheel bearing grease, aiding in the installation of that piece. You don't want to force it on or damage it. Once that's in place, go ahead and put the drive pulley back in. Remember that the pulley has 2 dowels cut into it. You want to line that up with the Allen key screws and then go ahead and lock those down. They don't need to be super tight. Once that's in place, go ahead and put the tensioner bracket back in place by loosely applying these 2 screws. Go ahead and drop the belt in at this point. If you forget and install the shaft, you're going to have to lower the shaft once again. Once the belt is in place, push up on the shaft until the shaft enters the bearing and install the screw. You'll notice everything kind of line up in place. At that point, go ahead and lock those 2 screws back down. That'll make sure that everything is nice and secure and straight. Once that's all secure, go ahead and install the motor. I'll put a link in the description for a video that goes more in detail on how to install the drive belt and the cardboard cutout that aids in the installation. The next thing to consider or to keep in mind is that heatsink. There is some heatsink gel on there, some lube. If it is easy to clean off, go ahead and take that off and reapply a fresh coat of heatsink lube just to aid in heat transfer into the body so the motor doesn't overheat. Once I had everything together for the second time, I went ahead and performed a vacuum test using the Diverx vacuum adapter. This is a 20-minute video in about 20 seconds. As you can see, held vacuum very well. The last thing I want to talk about is the Castle Link programming kit. This is only like 20 bucks or something like that on Amazon. You can use this to program the speed settings on the Piranha. You kind of have to, especially if you are diving with people who are using the black tip. The Piranha from the factory on speed 1 is like 25% power. That is like speed 7 or 8 on the black tip, depending on the diver's configuration. So I had to cut that down. I now start out at about 12.5% power in speed 1. Then it jumps up to 18% and then 25% for speed 3. And I think pretty much I'll only be using those 3 speeds when diving with other Piranha divers, or I should say other black tip divers. That's the whole video. I hope this helped. Like I said, I'll put in the link for the belt replacement in the description. I'll also add a link to another video where a shaft seal is being replaced. They talked a little bit more in detail about some of the minor details when replacing the shaft seals. I hope, however, that this video gave you a little bit of insight on how to do your own maintenance. Again, if you have questions or want more information about something that maybe I wasn't clear about, please ask in the comments. I'd be more than happy to answer questions. Take care and see you on the next one.